Hello students, today I've got another anatomy lesson for you. Today we are talking about movement terms. These are all the motions as they apply to the body. So we are going to go over what those movements are, what joints they apply to, and give you a few memory tips and devices so hopefully you can remember them easily for your next examination, okay? Now I make this video to accompany my other video on the revision of the skeletal system, which I released last week. So if you have not seen that video yet, I recommend clicking on that link in the description box down below to get a little bit of a background into what we are going to study today. Now, students, see, here's the big picture. We have multiple joints that all move in incredibly unique ways. So simple terms like up and down and sideways don't apply to the subject of physical education here, okay? You need to understand that physical education is a scientific subject, very much like your mathematics and physics, and most importantly, biology. Physical education is, after all, based on the subject of biology. So just like any other scientific subject, and since we are taking the example of biology to make you understand even better, just like the subject of biology is filled with all these technical terms and you just can't explain your answers to the examiner in random layman's language like an English based paragraph or an essay writing competition, just like your subject of biology is filled with these complex technical terms, and all of these technical terms mean something or the other. Similarly, your subject of physical education is also loaded with technicalities and technical terms, just to make things very clear and specific in our minds with respect to a sense of direction as well as a sense of movement or motion. So we need to understand that, okay? Terminologies like up and down and sideways and these general terms are not going to apply to your subject of physical education. So what I want to tell you is that we need very unique specific terms which can describe very unique specific movements happening in your body, okay? That is what I'm trying to tell you. And when we are talking of anatomical motions or movements or motions which are arising anatomically, because according to your syllabus, the first unit of your syllabus is dedicated to anatomy and physiology. So you will keep listening to this term anatomy, and various other terms which are derived from anatomy very often from me. So when we are talking of anatomical motions, students, we refer to an imaginary body which is standing in an anatomical position, that's standing upright, feet forward, arms by your side with your palms facing forward, and lastly, your head is neutral, which is also looking forward. Having said that, I'm sure you students remember what an anatomical position is because we discussed it in detail during the last live class, which I conducted with all of you. And you were also preparing your notes. So I've said it before in the live class, and I'm going to say it again to you. Always refer to your anatomical position whenever you are talking about a sense of direction or motion. If you don't want to make mistakes in your examinations, this is forever and always your starting point in anatomy. Why? Why should it be the starting point? Well, it's very tempting to say something like move the patient's leg up to refer to hip flexion when someone is in the anatomical position, when someone is standing in the anatomical position. But that's a completely different motion when they are lying on their side, for instance. In that case, the same motion is known as abduction. So in order to standardize language, we always refer to the anatomical position to start off with. Having said that, the second thing which we have to keep in mind is that we have planes of motion. We have three planes of motion: the frontal plane, the sagittal plane, and the transverse plane. I also spoke about these planes in the live class. I remember that clearly, and I also gave you some dictation which must have helped you. But this video is dedicated to your revision. So if you are running short of time, you can just play out this video, listen to my voice, and get all your facts revisited and rechecked. So where were we? Three planes which pass through the center or the midline of your body, which is an imaginary vertical line. We have the frontal plane, we have the transverse plane, and we have the sagittal plane. Now, if you paid attention to my live physical education class this week, you will remember that I did say that the frontal plane refers to the imaginary vertical plane that passes right through the midline of the body in such a way that it is always facing forward. Sagittal plane, on the other hand, is the one that is imaginary and vertical, of course, but this one passes through the midline of the body in such a way that it is oriented at a 90-degree angle to your frontal plane. Lastly, we have what is known as the transverse plane. Now, this transverse plane refers to an imaginary horizontal plane that again passes through the center of your body, but in such a way that it is oriented at a 90-degree angle to both the frontal as well as the sagittal planes. Got it? Great. Time to move on. So that's about the planes of the body. Similarly, we have three axes of motion with which these limbs and joints move around. First of all, we have the cranial caudal axis. So anytime during the course of this video, you feel like pausing the video and jotting down your notes, please keep doing that. And I hope that you have your physical education notebook ready with you already with a pen to keep pausing this video wherever you feel like it. In case you feel that the pace of the video is too fast for you, just pause it wherever you feel like pausing it and keep making your notes, because these notes are eventually going to help you in the future with your revision for your internal assessments or your SE1 and SE2 or your board exams for that matter. So I'm talking about the axes which are passing through the body. First of all, write down the cranial caudal axis. We also have the left right axis and we have the anterior posterior axis. We will be discussing these in later we will be discussing them in great detail later on in the consequent live classes. Okay. Now, why do we need to study about these planes and axes? That's because obviously your body exists and moves in 3 dimensions in real life. So while some motions seem like they happen in a very straightforward linear way, most day-to-day motions are a combination of all these basic motions. And in order to make sure that you are never confused about your body's sense of direction or motion, the clinicians and the doctors and the scientists decided to come up with these terminologies so that you never trip up, you never make mistakes, and you are never confused in your head. Now let's talk about the actual movement here. Let's start with abduction, which is the movement of a joint away from the midline of the body, and adduction, which is movement towards the midline of the body. Specifically, the midline on the sagittal plane. So underline sagittal plane. Now both these terms sound very similar and most of the students tend to get confused between these two terms, and some physical education textbooks will also painstakingly spell out abduction or adduction to make it super clear. But the difference is actually way easier to remember and understand, and I'm going to share this mental trick with you. I picture an alien abduction taking my arm away from me. Whereas with adduction, I'm adding to the side of my body. That's how I remember my terminologies. Hopefully, this is going to help you as well. You'll see these motions all the time with shoulders and your hips, but you can also apply them to fingers and wrists. And I'm going to show you how. In those cases, abduction does not necessarily mean going away from the body's midline, but from the midline of the hand. So really, finger abduction is the same as spreading your fingers, while adduction is closing them. How can we understand this better? So if I've got my hand here, okay, if I spread out my fingers, what is actually happening? My fingers are moving away from this imaginary midline, which is passing through the center of my palm. So we can call this in layman's language as spreading out the fingers. Similarly, if I close my fingers, what is happening? Adduction, because all the fingers are getting added back onto the midline of my palm. So this is what I'm trying to explain to you. One little note though, some clinicians will call this motion, the one which I'm going to show you now, as wrist abduction or adduction, but some call it as radial deviation. What am I talking about? These are the fingers which I'm talking about. Now I'm going to talk about the wrist. So I'm just going to change the camera angle a bit. It might be a little inconvenient for you. It will be a time taking process, but please bear with it, students, because your understanding is most important here. Okay, so what happens is this. Look at this. I want you to look at my wrist over here. So here is my wrist and I'm standing nice and tall. This motion in which the wrist or the entire palm is moving away from the midline of the body, and this motion. So we will call it technically as wrist abduction and wrist adduction. But some people prefer to call it as radial deviation, meaning that the hand is moving towards the radius. And some people will call this motion, which is wrist adduction, as ulnar deviation, because the wrist or the entire palm is moving towards the ulna. So as I'm standing straight, pay attention once again to my wrist over here. This is my anatomical position where the palms are facing forward. Now I start moving my wrists away from the body. It is your wish. If you feel like it, you can still call it as wrist abduction, because the wrists are moving away from the midline of the body. And this movement is wrist adduction. Are we clear about that? Because the wrists and the palms are moving towards the midline of the body. Similarly, this can also be known as uh, radial deviation, and this movement can be known as ulnar deviation, because when you move the wrist like this, the wrist is moving towards the radius of the body, and when the wrist moves like this, the wrist is moving towards the ulna of the body. Having said that, I hope that this is clear to you. Now I'm just going to take a few extra seconds here to bring the camera back to my face so that you can see my face and understand the concepts better. Okay, so wrist abduction and adduction, some people call it as radial deviation, meaning that the hand is moving towards the radius, or ulnar deviation, meaning that the hand is now moving towards your ulna. I hope that this concept is clear to you. Basically, what I was trying to explain to you is that radial deviation is nothing but the same as wrist abduction, and ulnar deviation is the same as wrist adduction. The things which I just demonstrated to you, the movements which I just showed to you, they are the exact same thing, but since the hand and the wrist are so often not in the anatomical position naturally, they're easier to remember this way, and that is why the clinicians have decided to come up with alternate names for these types of movements. Next, we have bending and straightening of the limbs. More technically, flexion, which is a decrease in the angle between two joints, and extension, which is an increase in that angle. It's pretty easy to understand, and in fact intuitive by nature in terms of the simple joints like the knee and the elbow, or even the spine for that matter. But some joints are a little more trickier than that. And like this is a shoulder flexion, the one which I am going to show you now. Just take a look at me. I'm going to show you what is known as a shoulder flexion. If I just go away a little bit, this is shoulder flexion. Is that clear? I'm going to change the camera angle again. Today, the pace of the video is going to be fasting low, fasting low. So like this shoulder flexion, which I have just shown you, but to me, it just looks like my arm is going away from my body. You can also say that, but ma'am, why should we call it a shoulder flexion when the arm is simply moving away, typically from the midline of the body in a certain way? So I might as well also call this motion as abduction, right? But it is not abduction. Why is it not abduction? Well, that's because abduction and adduction refer to movements of any limb away from or towards the midline of the body, particularly the midline on the sagittal plane. So I had to come up with a separate way to remember flexion versus extension. How can we remember it? Now, I have understood that flexion is very much like the fetal position, which clearly both start with the alphabet F. So check out the fetal position on the internet whenever you get time. You'll find that the hips and the knees are in flexion, the shoulders and the elbows and the wrists are also in flexion, and the neck and all the parts of the spine are also in flexion. So that's right, flexion and fetal, two best F words for any memory device as far as this movement is concerned. Now coming to extension. Now extension is the exact opposite of flexion. You are increasing the angle between two joints, which usually results in the straightening of the limb or extending it past that frontal plane midline. But be careful, because flexion and flexing are two very important things, but very different from each other. Before we move on to the terms of flexing and flexion, let's just talk a little bit more about extension. Extension is definitely the increasing of the angle at any particular joint between two different bones. But I also mentioned that extension also means that the movement of any limb past the midline of the body, and particularly I'm talking about the midline which is present in the frontal plane of the body. And that is exactly what I had shown to you earlier in this video also. So please take a look at my shoulder joint once again. I'm going to perform a movement which is definitely shoulder flexion, and then I'm going to perform a movement which is known as shoulder extension. If you are not clear about the types of movements which we are discussing in this video, then you will get confused between shoulder flexion and shoulder extension and abduction and adduction. Now, I don't want you to go through that. So what is happening here? Let's see. If I'm standing on my side profile, taking my arm up, this is shoulder flexion. Why? Because my arm is moving away from the midline which is present on the frontal plane of my body. So if I am facing the camera through my side profile, I am not facing the camera full frontal. My side is facing the camera, which means I may be looking at a certain person who is standing right in front of me. So if I'm facing one of my students, for example, who is standing right in front of me, somebody you might not be able to see in the camera right now. So I want you to just imagine that there is somebody standing in front of me who is not included in the frame of my camera right now. So I'm facing that person, and what is happening? Where is my frontal plane? My frontal plane is also facing the person standing in front of me. Now, when I perform shoulder flexion and my arm goes all the way up, what is happening to my arm? Technically speaking, my arm is moving ahead. It is not moving past, it is moving ahead of the midline present on the frontal plane of my body. That is why it is known as shoulder flexion and not abduction. Because what is abduction? Abduction happens in this orientation. Now I am facing the camera, so I can face you, and you know that my frontal plane is right here. Abduction means movement of the limb away, yes, once again, from the midline of the body, but the midline which is passing through the sagittal plane. This sagittal plane is the one which is oriented at 90 degrees to the frontal plane. So this time, the movement of the arm is happening away. You can imagine an imaginary arrow pointing upwards towards my arm over here. My limb is moving away from the midline present in the sagittal plane, the plane which you cannot see. What you can see is the frontal plane. So this screen in front of your laptop or your phone right now, that is my frontal plane. So this is abduction, but when I turn my body to the side and I raise my arm all the way up, this upward movement which is away from the midline present in the frontal plane is known as my shoulder flexion. Having said that, this is movement of the limb away and in the forward direction. Away, but in the forward direction, or ahead. You can use the word ahead. The movement of the limb ahead from the midline present in the frontal plane of the body. Similarly, if my limb goes behind, which means if my limb passes the midline present in the frontal plane, then this is known as shoulder extension. So shoulder flexion, when the limb or the arm is moving ahead of the midline present in the frontal plane, and this is known as shoulder extension when the limb or the arm is moving past the midline present in the frontal plane of the body. I hope we are clear with these terminologies. Why this lecture is very important for all of you is because these terminologies and their correct, accurate explanations are not present in your Cambridge IGCSE textbook so far. So we need to make sure that we are absolutely thorough and clear and accurate with our knowledge of anatomy and physiology. Very much like the clinicians and the MBBS students. We are no less than the MBBS students who are studying anatomy and physiology in the first year of their college, right? That's how we should think of ourselves. That's how high our standards for ourselves in terms of physical education's anatomy and physiology studies should be. So when we say flex a muscle, now let's talk about flexing and flexion. So I just wanted to take a couple of extra minutes here to explain to you the difference between shoulder flexion and shoulder extension and abduction and adduction, and why these movements are different and what types of planes are involved in these different types of respective movements. Having said that, number one, flexing, number two, flexion. Now we have discussed this in great detail during the live class which was conducted this last week also, but let's just have a quick revision, because the more we revise, the more this knowledge gets synced inside our brains and becomes a part of our long term memory. So chances are that we will not forget about these informations when we are writing the exam paper. So when we say flex a muscle, what we are actually trying to say is to put tension on that muscle, to contract it. And yes, when you are flexing your bicep also, you are also doing elbow flexion, but you can also flex your quadriceps while you are extending your knee. So flexing is all about putting tension on the muscle, but it does not always necessarily translate into flexion or decrease of the angle at the joint. For example, the most common example is the kicking of the ball while playing football. So when the quadriceps contract, the knee extends, which leads to the total extension of the leg, which eventually leads to the kicking of the ball. So that's what I was trying to say. When the quadriceps contract, you are putting tension on that muscle. But what is the end result, or the cumulative result of that contraction of the particular quadriceps? It leads to the result of knee extension and final leg extension. So there is no flexion happening, but there is extension happening, which is about the increase of the angle at a particular joint. Got it? Great. Let's move on. So we are done with the difference between flexing and flexion. Next up, we have medial and lateral rotation, sometimes also called internal and external rotation. And just like picturing rotation from physics, we first need to figure out what our axis is. So check out these motions. And I'm going to show you internal and external rotation while sitting and with a bent elbow. So once again, my camera angle is going to change. So please be patient with me, students. Let's see what we have here. So I'm going to just sit down, okay? If you're not able to see my face, then there's no point, because I like to have an organic connection with my students. So I'm sitting here. You can see my body, right? Now I'm going to bend my elbow. So as it is when I'm sitting, it is very tough for me to keep my arms straight and do any kind of a movement, because the bed is going to come in the way. So I'm going to bend my elbow. That's it. This is my elbow at a 90-degree. And I'm going to show you a specific type of a rotation. I'm rotating my arm out, and now I'm bringing my arm back in. So this is my external rotation, and this is my internal rotation. Now this movement which is happening at this shoulder joint is a very intuitive kind of a movement. You can very definitely make out that this arm rotation is external, because definitely my arm is moving away from the body, and this type of an arm rotation is internal, because definitely, as you can see also, that my arm is rotating back towards my body. We also have separate terms for this kind of motion. More technical terms, you can say lateral rotation, medial rotation. Why is this known as medial rotation? Because the arm is rotating back to the midline of the body. Lateral rotation, when the arm is moving away from the midline of the body. In layman's language, internal, external, internal rotation, external rotation. So I wanted to show this basic type of a movement to you first, so that I can start explaining the more intricacies or the complications which are sometimes related to the movement of rotation. Arms and legs are fine, but there are certain orientations of the body, certain postures of the body where the same rotational movement can sometimes become slightly confusing to understand. But this is the basic: external rotation, internal, lateral rotation, medial. Having said that, let's come back to the standing position. And I'm going to change my camera angle again, and let's continue with the discussion. So what I showed to you was rotation of my arm while I was in the seated position. And you pretty much understood it because it was very easy to understand and it is very intuitive to follow. So not much explanation going on there. Just a visual demonstration is enough to make you understand what rotation is. So for both the shoulder and the hip joint, our axis is going to be an imaginary line running through the long bone of those joints. You can practice this yourself if you want, whenever you have time. If you stand up and lock out your elbow, and then you rotate your shoulder so that the thumb starts to point towards your midline, you have medially or internally rotated your shoulder. Now on the flip side, if the thumb is heading back out, so we are doing what? Lateral or external rotation. Very simple to understand. Same thing with your hip joint. If you stand up and lock out your knee and the foot goes, towards the midline, it's medial rotation. And if it goes out, it's known as external or lateral rotation. But remember, movement terms use the anatomical position as a starting reference, okay? So if we are standing, we can get away using our hands and feet as our rough guides. It's very simple to understand. But that might not be the case. That might completely disappear if we have our person in the sitting position, or if we have the person change his or her position. Now, like, imagine for whatever reason you want to assess a patient or a sports person's internal shoulder rotation in a seated position. So what has happened? Now we have lost the basic starting anatomical position. And anatomical position is always the starting standing position. For whatever reason, your athlete or your sports person is now in the seated position, like I was just a couple of minutes ago. And now you have got to check the internal and the external rotation of the shoulder joint, something which I have already demonstrated to you also. Now this person is in the seated position. It's going to be really difficult now to work with a straight arm, as I showed you. So you gave your athlete a bent elbow. You told the athlete to bend his or her elbow. So you have already seen this movement, but still, anyway, I'm going to show it to you once again. Let's see what's going to happen. Let me see if you can see my face. No, you cannot. Let's tilt up the camera a bit. So here we are. I'm seated again. I'm your athlete, and probably during the course of a match, I fell down or somebody knocked me down, and I might have suffered from a shoulder injury. Okay. If I fell on my upper body and maybe I ended up hurting one of my shoulders. Let's take this example of the left shoulder. So right, it's my right shoulder, but I'm mirroring it to you, so it's easier for you to understand. So this is basically my right shoulder. So if my clinician or my physical education coach wants to check whether there is a fracture or not, whether it's a minor injury or a major injury, that person is going to ask me to first of all bend my elbow like I showed you, because I can't keep it straight in the seated position. And maybe I'm fatigued, or I'm feeling giddy, or I'm not able to stand on my feet properly because of weakness, or maybe there has been a concussion as a part of the injury also. So the person or the coach is naturally going to ask me to settle down, sit down, and feel comfortable. Now my elbow is bent, and I'm going to demonstrate my external or lateral and my internal or medial shoulder rotation. So what has happened? I am not anymore in my starting anatomical position. This is not an anatomical position. An anatomical position is always your standing position. So this is what I was trying to tell you. When the athlete or the sports person is in a seated position and their rotational movement is being observed. Having said that, just give me a second to return back to our lecture. So this is what is going to happen. Assuming that my coach is checking out my shoulder rotation while I am in the seated position. So what is going to happen? Now in this case, internal and external rotation still make intuitive sense as far as my shoulder joints, as far as my arms are concerned. My arm is going towards my midline or away from my midline, which agrees with the long axis rotation which we have already defined earlier. That's awesome. It's very easy. It's very simple to understand. Unfortunately, that does not translate to the hip joint. Now take a look at this. I want you to look at the movement which I'm doing. Okay. Let's see what I'm about to do. You can very roughly take a look at my legs, but you cannot see my face. So here we go. Now, this is my hip joint, and I am once again going to refer to the axis of the long bone which is connected to my hip joint. So when the axis of the long bone which is attached to the hip joint moves towards the midline of the body, this is the movement. Can you look at my shin bone which is moving away now, away from me towards the outer direction and coming back? So when the axis of this long bone is turning or rotating towards the midline of the body, this is the resulting movement. And when the axis of this long bone attached to my hip joint is moving or rotating outwards or away from my midline, look at this movement of my shin bone again, the one which I'm touching right now, over here. So according to a layman's language, you might say, but ma'am, this shin which is moving, this lower part of the leg which is moving now is moving away from the body. Technically speaking, away from the midline of the body. And when the shin bone is moving over here in this direction, technically speaking, the shin bone or the lower half of the leg is moving towards the midline of the body, isn't it? So probably you might get confused and you might be tempted to call this movement as what? External rotation or lateral rotation, and this movement as what? Medial or internal rotation, when in actuality it is the exact opposite. Look at this movement once again. I'm going to demonstrate it to you slowly. Pause the video, rewind, watch it over and over again until you understand. In this movement, the first part of the movement, the shin bone is moving away from the body or the midline of the body, to be specific and technical. But what is happening to the axis of this long bone which is attached to the hip joint? Now, that axis of the long bone is actually turning where? Towards the midline of the body, towards the midline over here. Internal rotation is happening. But the consequent movement is what? The shin or the lower half of the leg is moving away from the body. So most of the students get confused here. They start feeling that this is external rotation or lateral rotation. But in actuality, when we look at the hip joint and the axis of the long bone which is attached to this hip joint, what is happening? The axis of this long bone right here is rotating towards the midline of the body. So you will call it internal or medial rotation and not external or lateral rotation. Coming to the second half of the movement, when this shin or the lower half of the leg is moving towards the body or towards the midline of the body, to be more specific. Students will get confused, you may get confused, and you may think that the leg is moving towards the midline of the body. So it should be known as internal or medial rotation, but it is not. Why? Because let's look at the axis of the long bone attached to the hip joint once again. The axis of this long bone is actually turning or rotating towards the outside or away from the midline of the body. This axis is moving away It's moving away. Look at my finger, this finger over here, which is moving accordingly. If my shin is moving towards the midline, in actuality, in reality, scientifically, this axis of the long bone has rotated away from the midline of the body, or it has rotated externally. So this movement will be known as external or lateral rotation. Very common doubt, very common confusion area for most of the physical education students. So I hope that this doubt of yours has also been clarified. Having said that, let's carry on with the rest of our discussion before we wind up for our revision podcast today. So, rotation is clear, I hope, to all of you, both in the seated as well as the standing position. Right here, I have actually done medial hip rotation. The long axis of the femur was rotating towards the midline. And vice versa, when I do the lateral hip rotation, or when you test this in a supine position also, the results are going to be more or less the same as when you are in a seated position. Okay, so the moral of the story, if you look at the long axis of the bone in the anatomical position, you will never falter or trip up or make mistakes in your exam. So those are our major multi-joint movements. But there are some exceptions. And from here on, it gets pretty specific and slightly complicated, but very easy to understand if you are smart enough. And I'm going to give you some tricks to become more smart in physical education. Like the radius. The radius has this cool ability to flip around the ulna due to a cool little pivot joint between the radius and the ulna. That's totally separate from your shoulder rotation. Let me show it to you. This is what it looks like. Take a look at this. I'm going to go back once again. So my hands are over here, my arms are here. I'm going to bend my elbow again, but because you're not able to see it, now you can take a look at my elbow joint over here. I'm going to create a 90-degree angle at my elbow joint. Now, speaking of the radius and the ulna in the forearm right here. So this flipping movement is very much possible. Why? Because there is a cool pivot joint between the radius and the ulna, and the radius can just flip in and out, over and above the ulna. The radius can just flip. The radius can keep rotating like this, in and out, in and out. It can keep rotating like this around the ulna, students. So, supination and pronation. This movement is known as supination when the radius is moving out, and this movement is known as pronation when the palm is facing down. How to remember these terms? This is very simple. This position or this movement of the radius flipping out, over or around the ulna. I'm going to repeat. This movement where the radius is flipping out, over or around the ulna is known as supination, because it very much looks like you are extending out your arm to ask for some more soup. I know, it gets dumber from here. The kind of memory tricks we sometimes have to employ to remember these names and terminologies. Pronation, on the other hand, can be imagined as, a group of professional athletes who are just piling their palms onto each other before the match is about to begin. But I'm still going to give you a dictation over here. So just get your PE notebooks ready, students, and let's write down what exactly supination and pronation are. Okay. Once you've got your pens ready, I'm going to just give you some time. Let me just give you a couple of seconds here to get your notebooks ready. Quickly get them ready. Now, the movement which I just showed you, where you were asking for some more soup, is known as supination. And the movement where the palm is facing down towards the floor, known as pronation. So supination, everyone can remember because you just flip your hand up as if you were asking for some more soup. Having said that, let's move on to pronation. Write down pronation quickly. On the other hand, you can always remember pronation because it's like a bunch of pro or professional national football players all putting their hands into a pile before the start of a match. It gets even weirder and more specific from here, like your ankle joint, for instance. When we speak of the ankle joint, we have something known as dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. What are these movements? I can remember these because when you point your toes down, you are planting your toes onto the ground. So it is known as plantar flexion. Then when you are pointing them back towards you, you're pointing them towards your dorsal aspect or your back. So dorsal flexion. But your ankle can still wiggle about a little more. What else can your ankle do? Well, that same ankle joint rotates around the long axis of the metacarpals to do inversion and eversion. What is inversion? What is eversion? Very easy to remember these as well. If you invert your feet, your body will trip over and your body will end up inverted too. But you can forever comfortably stand in eversion. So how do you remember eversion? Forever, if you try to stand in the everted position on your feet, or if you try to stand in eversion, it is possible to keep standing forever. All right. Eversion and inversion are very easy to understand, but for that, you need to simultaneously keep referring to your textbooks. So I hope that you have your textbooks right next to you. So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds here again to just open your textbooks to the page where we are talking about the ankle joint and the movements which are associated with the ankle joint. First of all, we have the plantar flexion, followed by the dorsiflexion. Very easy to understand. You plant your toes down, which means the toes are pointing away from you. In layman's language, you are pointing your toes, known as plantar flexion. In layman's language, when you are flexing your feet or when the toes are pointing up towards you, it is known as dorsal flexion because you are pointing upwards towards your back or your dorsal aspect. Having said that, inversion and eversion, if you stand in an inverted position, there are chances of you toppling over and your body will also become inverted. So very easy to understand, however dumb the logic might sound. On top of that, we have eversion. So when you stand on your feet in an everted position, what is happening? You can stay in that position forever. So you can stand on your feet in the everted position forever because you are not going to fall anywhere. Now we are getting to the end, but lastly, we need to look at the scapula also, okay? So your scapula, your shoulder blades we are talking about, your scapula are right behind you. If you take your arm behind you, you can actually feel your shoulder blades or scapula if you are skinny enough. Now, what can happen to your scapula? They can either elevate, they can depress, like the way I'm showing it to you right now. Okay. They can protract, they can retract, all of which are pretty intuitive to remember if you just look at them. Finally, we have what is known as circumduction. Just take a look at this. The movement which I'm doing right now is known as circumduction. Since you have seen it now, I'm sure you can clearly understand it. This big, silly looking circular motion that happens at a few joints like the neck, it happens like the shoulders, like I showed you, it happens at the hips, is known as circumduction. Take a look at this once again, this thing which I'm going to just show to you now. Just keep your notebooks ready also because I might just want you to, keep writing down your notes. Huge circular motion happening with your arms. It is known as circumduction. Now, those are all the major motions, but there are a couple of things to keep in mind. As a physical education student, you are probably going to care about these movement terms because they are going to help you document things like range of motion and also functional movements. Usually, we care about three types of movement, so just jot them down quickly. Active motion. Active motion, which means that the athlete is moving the joint with his or her own efforts, like I'm showing it to you right now. Passive motion, which means that the motion is being done to them either by your own hands or by an external machine. So what I'm showing now is passive motion. Resisted motion, which is self-explanatory. I'm trying to resist my movement. Some kind of resistance is being placed on that motion which I'm trying to do. So what kind of a motion am I trying to do here? This is my wrist over here. I'm trying to bring my fist all the way up towards my face, but the other hand of mine is resisting that upward movement and is applying an exactly opposite downward facing downward pointing force. So this wrist of mine is trying to move up, this fist of mine is trying to come all the way up, but it is not able to do so. Why? Because this other hand of mine is applying a force or a resistance in the exactly opposite direction, in the downward direction. So my wrist is not able to move upwards, my fist is not able to come to my face. So this is resisted motion. Active motion, which I'm doing with my own effort, at my own will and wish. Passive motion, this other hand of mine is making my wrist do this motion up and down, back and forth, and my wrist is not applying any active effort of its own. Resisted motion, my wrist is trying, is really trying so hard, is hell bent on bringing that fist all the way up in the upward direction, but it is not able to because the other hand of mine is applying a force or a resistance in the exact opposite downward direction. So these are the three types of motions which you also need to understand and quickly write them down in your notebooks so that you don't forget them for your exams. Those are the important distinctions to make because that might help you with your analysis of range and the quality of motion at a joint. So you might need to understand the difference between active, passive, and resisted motion. Because sometimes, as a coach yourself, later on in your career, later on in your life, you may have to assess an athlete's or a sport person's or a physical education student's range of motion, and not just the range of motion, the type of motion also. It can be active, it can be passive, or it can be resisted. For instance, if somebody had a painful active shoulder flexion, but they were fine on the passive shoulder flexion, then you can probably use that information while treating the athlete for any sports related injury, isn't it? It just helps in all your documentation. All anatomy and physical education students are going to need to know and understand these movement terms. So make sure, students, that you check out my previous video on revision of the skeletal system, followed by this one. Okay, so go in that sequence. I want you to catch up with, first of all, the revision of the total skeletal system syllabus, and then move on to this more detailed and in-depth study of the movements which are associated with your entire skeletal system. Having said that, it's been a long lecture, but a very fruitful one. And I am very hopeful, I'm very positive that this lecture is going to help you with your quick revision for your skeletal system. Roughly speaking, it is a major part of the Unit 1 of your Cambridge IGCSE syllabus. So to be more specific, this one video will cover everything that you have to do, or everything that has to do with the movements or the different types of motions which are associated with your entire skeletal system. And all these types of movements are definitely a part of your Cambridge IGCSE syllabus. So you want to make sure that you are not missing out on any type of movement. And this video more or less covers all the types of movements which are associated with that skeletal system of yours. Stay home, stay safe, boys and girls. Have fun, be good, and I'm going to see you next week with another revision podcast for the next topic of Unit 1 of Anatomy and Physiology, which is going to be your circulatory system. So stay tuned for our next live class. And following that, I'm going to come up with a revision podcast for all of you so that you do not face any difficulties or challenges during these tough, uncertain times as far as your studies and revision for physical education is concerned. Love you all. Stay safe and stay blessed.